try that again. We're speaking with the one and only Rick Lee of the band 10 years after. The latest is A Sting in the Tail. The album first came out in 2017, but it is being re-released with a bonus tracks. And as we say here in Montreal, bonjour, Rick. Comment allez-vous? How are you?
Let me think about this. No, the French has escaped me. I'm normally a bit better. You caught me out there. But I'm good, thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So let's talk about this, because there's so much history with the band, but let's focus on the present. You've got this re-release coming out. You've got these 4 bonus tracks. Talk to me about putting this album together and just putting it together, because it sounds great.
Thank you. It was a bit of a new thing for Chick and me. Because we'd not written in a collaborative way before. We'd done individual tracks on some of the old 10 Years After albums, but most of the writing was Alvin. And so it was a new sort of venture for us. We have 2 new guys who are fantastic. We have Marcus Bonfanti on vocals and keyboards. Not keyboards, sorry, guitar. And we have Colin Hodgkinson on bass.
Yep.
And on keyboards, we have Chick Churchill, of course, my old mate for over 50 years. So I went down to London to write with Marcus. We put together about eight songs, I think. And then Colin went and wrote with Marcus, and then Chick did. And the reason we did it that way, Marcus was the hub, because he's the chord man. And obviously, lyrically, he would want things to fit. And also pitch-wise, with the keys and stuff. So that was the basic songs being put together, just the verse and chorus. And then we honed them a little bit and got demos together and sent them to each other. And then we arranged a rehearsal, and that's when we really started kicking the stuff around and getting it into shape for what we really wanted. And we worked hard to make it a radio-friendly album. I think the longest track on there is Up in Smoke, which is about 6 minutes. In previous incarnations, if I take an example of I Can't Keep From Crying Sometimes, that started out as a 4-minute track on the very first 10 Years After album. And I think by the time we finished with it with Joe Gooch, when Joe Gooch was with us and Leo Lyons, it was 19 minutes long. And that's because we basically had the verse and the chorus at the beginning and the end, and then anything in between was anybody's guess. We'd be jamming it. And when Alvin was with us, he was chucking in new bits and pieces all the time. So this time we wanted to make something that we thought people could listen to. It's fine if you're really into 10 Years After and you've seen us live and whatever, and you want a memento of that occasion, I guess. But so anyway, this worked for us. We're really, really happy with it. We're very pleased with the way it came out. It's been out in Europe for about nearly 3 years now.
Yeah, but not the deluxe edition with the bonus tracks.
Well, because what happened was a friend of mine, a DJ in Philadelphia, T. Morgan, I first met him in '67, and he was the first man in America to actually play 10 Years After records. He'd been over to England, seen us at the Marquee Club, and he picked up the first 2 albums, started playing tracks. And he said, this Sting in the Tail album is too darn good to be lost. It's only available on import, and the occasional somebody might order one from the distributor. You need to get it out there and let people know it's out. So he very kindly introduced us to DEKO Entertainment. That's DEKO.
Yep, I've heard of them before.
Sorry?
I've heard of them before. They've done great work.
Yeah, good. Oh, well, they're working very, very hard with this. I mean, I'm very pleased with the deal so far. And they're putting it out on the 19th of March. And the reason it's called the Deluxe Edition is because they've added 4 live tracks, which were taken from a subsequent album we did called Naturally Live, which I'm hoping we can get out in America maybe later this year. And Canada, of course.
Of course.
The North America is how it's defined in contracts.
It is.
America and Canada.
Hey, let me just ask you before we go on. You got to work, or you're working with Colin, and Colin, of course, got to do so many albums over the years, but he's on one of my all-time favorites. He's on the Slide It In with David Coverdale and Whitesnake, and there's two versions of that Slide It In. I happen to prefer the British mix with Colin and so on and so forth. But what does he bring to the mix? Because that son of a gun can play.
He certainly can. He's the absolute rock, and he's also, we call him the Groove Meister, because which is German for Groove Master, of course. And he lays down the grooves. I mean, the best example I can give you is Love Like a Man, which we still do. Which was I don't know if it was a hit in the States, but it was a top 5 in England and Europe. And when we always do, obviously the riff has to be there, and the verses and the chorus, and then the solo. What I do at that point is I'm kind of just vamping, just keeping a very simple beat. And then Marcus walks across the stage to Colin, and they face each other. And Marcus is kind of vamping as well. And Colin then fiddles through a few grooves until he finds the one that he fancies that night. Because it's never the same one. And then I'm waiting until that happens. And then when he settles into that groove and then Marcus is jamming with him, then I start to jam a little more and change the rhythms a little bit around what he's doing, playing on and off of what he's doing. And Chick's doing the same. Chick's very good rhythmic player. And then that solo will develop. And sometimes it reaches incredible highs. Other times it doesn't. It's just luck of the draw as to whether everybody's really gelling together. Or if the audience is, I mean, most of the time the audiences are really with us, which is fantastic. But you do get the occasions when it just, doesn't click. But most of the time, about 99% of the time, it works. So that's how it works with Colin and me.
Well, that's the thing, because as the rhythm section, you have to click, and if it ain't, you got to replace. And I'm assuming that when he walked in, it just locked. Because
it took a bit of time because Chick and I wanted to use a guitarist we worked with before,
right?
But sadly, when he came to the rehearsals, he was a bit overawed by what Joe Gooch had been doing. Joe Gooch was a very technical guitar player, very very fast, and this guy. I think he felt intimidated by it, and it didn't. So we had to ask him or tell him that sorry, but it wasn't going to work, which is disappointing, on a friendly level and a musical level. And then we were really and truly, I was working through a list that was about as long as my arm of people, and we were getting towards the end of that list. And Chick was in Australia visiting his son, and he phoned me and he said, "What's happening? Have we got somebody?" I said, "Well, I'm running out of people." I said, a lot of the people have been very flattered to be asked, but they're working on their own thing and they don't want to change what they're doing right now. Anyway, a bit of luck. I was talking to a PR man, not about the band, about something totally different. And I asked him if he knew any good young blues guitarists and singers. And he said, "Well, I know a very good blues singer. He's just been nominated for a blues award." I'm going back now to 2013, 14, when Marcus first joined us. And he gave me his name, but I couldn't find him anywhere. I looked on, he didn't have a website at that point. Eventually I found him on Facebook, and I wrote to him and said, "I don't know if you'd be interested, but we're looking for a new lead man for 10 years after. Would you be interested?" And he came straight back to me. He said, "Yeah, I'll be very interested." So then we got some rehearsals together, and off we went. And that's when it really clicked. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk to me about the decision to move forward, because you look at bands that's change members. Some are successful, some are not. When you got to 2014 and you said, "Okay," talk to me about that decision to not pack it in and not go, "Oh, we're done," and say, "Nope, we're going to keep going because we've got more to say and more shows to play."
Yeah, actually, in a sense, it was Chick's decision. I said to him, "So what do we do now? Are we retiring? You know, we weren't young guys even then, you know." And he said, "Well, what's the reason?" He said, "We make a good living out of what we're doing. We've got this amazing catalogue of heritage stuff that Alvin's left us. Why don't we find some new people and carry on and keep doing it?" So I said, "Fine, that's great." That was the answer I was looking for, you know. And Colin was always first call because we'd met Colin a lot in Europe when he was working with Spencer Davis Group. And when I called him, Spencer had just disbanded the band. And I said, "Would you fancy having a crack with us?" And he said, "Oh, that's great." He said, "Yeah, I was wondering what to do next. You know, I hadn't got anything in the pipeline." And I mean, he was always going to be first call because he's such a great player and such a great guy as well. And that's as important in a sense as the players, you know.
Absolutely.
Sorry?
I said absolutely.
Yeah.
Let me just also ask you about making new music, because you're right. You do have this catalog. You can book a show in Montreal tomorrow, pandemic notwithstanding, and play your 15 greatest, and everybody's going to clap and go home happy.
Yeah.
Why go through the rigmarole of getting a studio and writing songs and figuring out parts and blah, blah? Why not just say fuck it? Sorry, but why not just say F it? We're going to go play I'd Love to Change the World 12 times and that'll call it a show. Why bother?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned I'd Love to Change the World. Because,
greatest song ever written.
Well, that's one of the live tracks with the new deluxe edition.
Yep.
But Alvin would never play that live. We never played it live with Alvin. Quite what the reason behind that was, I never figured it out. Something to do with the acoustic guitar and the electric guitar. But I mean, Joe Gooch got around that to begin with. He had an acoustic guitar set up on a stand, and he played the beginning on that, and then moved over onto the electric. Later, he just changed and used a quieter sound for the acoustic parts, which is what Marcus does. So that, I mean, yes, we could just always do that, but we've always wanted to keep moving forward. When we had new players, the first thing we did actually, excuse me, with Colin and Marcus, was we did a live album, put a live album out very quickly called The Name Remains the Same, just to let people know that the band was still going and we had new members. Then we decided it would be good to do an album that we all could participate in with new, fresh material. And we do change the show a lot. We rotate stuff. We don't always stick with the same songs. And we'll probably still be drawing on a few of the Sting in the Tail songs to put live. We don't do them all yet, but we do a lot. So we mix and match. So it's probably, I think it's probably a 60% favor in, if you like, in favor. Sorry, it's 60% in favor of the old songs. Purely because we do a 2-hour set, and I'll explain to you another little bit which makes it work. And then we do 40% of new stuff. And when I say new stuff, some of that is actually new in the sense that it's very old TYA stuff that we pull into the set. I'm Coming On, for instance, which hadn't been done for ages, and in fact we more or less. We didn't rewrite it, but we changed. It wasn't quite a finished song when it was done on.
You gave it a live treatment, which is you gave it a live treatment, which is what you should be doing.
We kind of finished it. It needed rounding off. It wasn't rounded off, So we did that. And what we also do now is we do a short semi-acoustic slot in the middle of the show with 3 songs. We do, and they're all Alvin songs. We do Portable People, which is a single that disappeared without trace. But Marcus really liked it. He said, "Can we do that?" I said, "Yeah, why not? Let's do it." And then and we do Don't Want You Woman, which was Alvin's take on a Brunsey idea. And then we do Losing the Dogs, which Alvin had co-written with Gus Dudgeon, who was the engineer on our first 3 albums. And what we do is Marcus sits down at the microphone with a semi-acoustic guitar. Colin sits on a seat at the side, and I'm sitting between the 2 of them with just a snare drum and brushes and occasional stick. and then Chick's on the keyboards on the other side of the stage. And we weren't sure when we first did it how it would go, but it goes down an absolute storm. And I'm able to do little stories about the songs, which gives it some nice background, for the audiences.
And it makes it an intimate show. Since we've mentioned Alvin a couple of times, let's just talk about Alvin for a second. I mean, just one of the greatest guitarists to walk the face of the earth. No denying that he was just incredible. What are some of your favorite memories of Alvin, and what did he bring to the band? Because, it's one thing to be a great guitarist, but it's another thing to be a great band member and play for the song and play for the band and not just go off and be, I'm the star here. What did he bring to the band in terms of everything, songwriting, musicality, performance?
Well, one of my fondest memories is actually about I'd Love to Change the World, because when we recorded that, I was ill to start with. I was away for 2 days from the studios. We were doing it in Olympic 2 in Barnes in London, which is where the Stones used to record actually at one time. And Olympic 2 studios, just to give you a bit of a feel of what was happening, it was about 3 or 4 steps. The control room was 3 or 4 steps lower than the actual studio. So to get into the studio, you had to go up these steps. And then the drums, and I guess it was the engineer's preference, it wasn't anything to do with me, were set up in the corner right by the control room window, which, if I was sitting on the drum kit, was sort of just about up to my knee level. I could see into the control room, but anybody in the control room would be looking up basically at my knees and the bottom end of my snare drum. And when we were doing, as I say, I was away for a couple of days, but the guys decided to put down the track without me. And in those days, there were no click tracks. There's no metronomes used. So the track shifted a little bit here and there. So I then had to put the drums on. When I came back, I put the drums on afterwards. And Alvin was fantastic because he stood at the control room window looking at me. We could actually just get a bit of eye contact. And I think it was 2, maybe 3 takes to get it. God, I knew the song anyway because we'd rehearsed it before we went to the studio. And they ran the track, and I think we did one drop-in, what's called a drop-in, just to quickly explain to the listeners if they don't know, is that you record up to a point and then you stop, and then you run the track again. So I'm listening to it in the headphones, and I play along with it, and then they press the record button as I'm continuing to play. And that's what's called a drop-in. You drop in the recording in. And I think that would happen probably around about where the chorus started. I think that's where it lifted a bit, because obviously by the time I got to it, there's an acoustic guitar and an electric guitar had been put on top of what the bass and the keys had done as well. So I did that, and I'm pretty sure it was 3 takes. And at the end of it, Alvin's standing there grinning from ear to ear, and his thumbs up, and wow, brilliant! Come and hear it, And very complimentary about it. So that was a really good remembrance.
And by the way, let's not forget, it was a top 10 single in Canada. So
hey.
us Canadians have treated the band well over the years. It was top 10, but boy, I don't even know what to ask about that song because I've heard so many treatments of it. I've heard so many other bands cover it. LA
Really?
Guns, Tesla, a whole bunch of other bands have covered it. And whatever version, it just works. I mean, a great song is a great song. And when you can, give these different versions and it still sounds great. Have you heard all these other versions? Have you heard all these covers?
To be perfectly honest, no, I've not heard many. It's been used in quite a few films.
Yeah.
And it's still, I think the lyric is still relevant today, really. With the COVID situation, I'd love to change the world, but I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
It's
it's a timeless song with a timeless lyric, and here I'll move on after this. But when you first heard it, or they first brought it to you, or the band sits, do you know right away and just go, yeah, that's a good one. That's a biggie.
No way. No, we didn't. The only thing I remember was when Clive Davis came to see us at Madison Square Garden before we signed to Columbia. We were still with London Records then. And he came to see us, and he kind of had to come in incognito because he was going to be poaching bands, you know. And he said, "Give me the songs, and I'll give you a gold record." We'd never had a gold record up to that point. We'd sold a lot of records, but nothing had gone gold, which was 400,000 units in those days. And Clive said, "Well, give me the songs, and I'll give you a gold record." And that's what happened. He chose "I'd Love to Change the World" as the single, and off it went. You know, and the album went gold, and he delivered what he said he would do.
Let me ask you just about Clive real quick, because I was talking to the guys in Air Supply the other day, and you know, they're like, "Hey, Clive came in and changed the lyrics to one of our songs, and it became this big thing." What did he do for you? Other than pick this single, did he sit in the studio and say, "You should try this, you should try," like how involved?
Yeah. We never saw him in the studio because we were recording in England.
Okay.
As I say, in Olympic 2, you know. Okay,
so let me rephrase. How important was his input then? Because he must have obviously commented on stuff. How brilliant was he? Let's put it that way.
From a man coming into your life and saying, "I'm going to give you a gold record," and then achieving it, obviously a great influence. But he invited me to one of the A&R meetings, which they used to have on a Monday morning at 9 o'clock at Columbia on 6th Avenue. We were staying at the Hilton, and he said, "Come over and sit in on the A&R on the promotion meeting." And what happened was I think there were 50, maybe more guys who'd flown in on the red eye from all around the country, and came and sat around this huge boardroom table, and I was sort of sitting up top, not far from Clive. Clive was sitting at the end with his two key. Steve Popovich was the head of promotion then, and I can't remember the other guy, but there were two guys right next to Clive, and then the whole of the long table. But I was up near the top of the table, and Clive would say, "Okay, gentlemen, the meeting is open. Let's hear from Texas. What's happening in Texas?" And the guy would say, "Well, we've got good play on Chicago. We've got good play on whoever, you know, let's say Air Supply, but, you know, whatever bands they were working on at the time." And he said, "I think we could do really well with 10 Years After with I'd Love to Change the World." And that became the norm right around the table. And, you know, there you go.
Top 10 in Canada. We'll keep repeating it. The band, of course, does play Woodstock. You have this success. You've got these songs going, A Space and Time, the whole thing. Clive Davis on your... And at some point, you just throw in the towel and break up. What broke the camel's back, in a sense? Why did because, I mean, you're Woodstock, you're this, you're Clive, why did it not just become like the Rolling Stones and go on for 50 years? Why was there that split where you just went, all right, I can't stand these guys?
It's a very good question. Over the period from after Woodstock, we started playing what we call the enormodromes. Madison Square Garden, Budokan in Tokyo, the old Royal Albert Hall, we played about 3 times in London, the Arundel in Frankfurt, you know, all these 20,000 seater things.
The temples of rock, basically.
Well, yeah, except that Alvin was really not happy with it.
Right.
He didn't relate to that, and he didn't like. We had he had AM in those days, and that's where
I remember.
That's where I'd Love to Change the World had been a hit, really, and he wasn't happy with the AM audience. They basically were screaming teenagers. And he considered, and he was right, he considered himself a musician rather than a pop star. And I think the disenchantment just grew and grew in the years over well, I know it did, because when we did essentially the last album, the Positive Vibrations, I mean, if anything, it was less than positive vibrations. Anyway, we sort of limped along until 1975, and at that point we had an American manager, a guy called D. Anthony, who was very, very good for us in the early days. But then he really wanted, I think, to manage Alvin as a solo artist and a solo career. And Alvin turned to me one day, he said, by the way, he said, I'm the star of the show and you guys are going on wages. So I said, I'm not. So he said, yeah, you are. You're going on wages. People tell me I'm the star of the show and you're going on, you should be on wages. And I said, I don't disagree with you about being the star of the show. I said, there's no two ways about that. You absolutely are. I said, but if you wanted to put everybody on wages, you should have done it 8 years ago, because I'm a Libran, and I believe in fairness. And I said, you know, we took the rough with the smooth. This may never have happened. We may never have got this far. We went through a lot of rubbish with you. Not just, I don't mean him. I mean all of us. You know,
right. The whole thing. And isn't it great when managers start saying that? They always take one guy aside, like they did with Alice Cooper. Go, Alice, you're the star here. Oh.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's not the first time.
Nope. But won't be the last.
But I said, you know, the thing is that we took that rough with you, you know, and we helped in some instances. We pushed you through it as well. If you, I have a book out, you know, called From Headstocks to Woodstock. If you read that, you'll see there are times way before that we had to influence Alvin to get our deal with Chris Wright, our manager, who took us to those, well, not on his own, but helped us to get to those heights that we did. We were going up to Manchester. The chapter in the book's called Manchester on a Tenner, because we filled our van up with 10 quid's worth of petrol, which is about all we had between us at the time. And we got as far as Luton, which is about 30 miles north of London. And the tyre went on the van, and we had to go and we had to have a new tyre. It wasn't just a burst tyre, the tyre was knackered. We had to have a new tyre, which I think cost us, we managed to scrape another tenner together somehow. And we actually got to Manchester, and we did the audition with Chris Wright, and then he became our manager later. But Alvin was all in favour of going back to London when that happened. When we got to Luton and the tyre burst, he said, well, we'll get this fixed and we'll go back to London. This is a wasted journey. And we all said, no, we don't know. We've got to give it a shot, you know. So there were those things about him. I mean, that we carried with us for all the 8 years that we've been together to 75. And I said, no, I'll take my chances. I just started my own publishing company. And I'd signed a very good writer, which I subsequently had a hit with. And I said, you know, I'll take my chances. I'm not. Well, you can't do that. I said, oh, I'm doing it. You know, if that's what you want to do, I'm out of here. You know. Yeah. And we did one more tour after that, which was basically it was what we called the tax tour for Chrysalis. But I won't bore you with those details.
Yeah, the tax tour. But before we wrap up here and remind the folks, of course, A Sting in the Tail Deluxe Edition is coming out in March. Since you mentioned Budokan and you mentioned Royal Albert Hall and you mentioned Madison Square Garden, as a rock fan, you look at, you know, Cheap Trick at Budokan and whatever, Eric Clapton or whoever at Royal, those are the holy grails. Is there something when you walk into those buildings that is just different and you can feel it? And is there one that's just better to play, or are they just like those are the ones? Those are the crown jewels.
Well, I think it was different at the time we did it, you know, because they were all quite new in a sense. Madison Square Garden is a barn of a place, you know, and in those days, don't forget, there were no screens with the video. So people up in the gods, we must have been looking about, you know, 3 inches tall, you know, and what the sound was like, I have no idea, because PA systems weren't developed to what they are nowadays. So I think I think it was a $20 ticket, which would be quite pricey in those days. God knows what it is now. You were paying a lot of money really for crap sound and sight, you know. And we were lucky. True. Thank God we filled it, you know. Same with Budokan was similar, very similar. And the thing that put Alvin off in Budokan was that one guy jumped up, one fan was so keen, and he jumped up on stage and started running around to try and touch Alvin. And then the local sort of security force ended up with about 7 people running around the stage, in and out of the amplifiers, around the drum kit, and they're all only about sort of 4 foot tall. I thought it was hilarious, but Alvin wasn't impressed with it.
That is hilarious. And by the way, it is interesting because we do romanticize those times. But listen, I started seeing shows in '79, and yeah, if you weren't front row, you couldn't see a damn thing. And sometimes it was so loud if you didn't have earplugs, you couldn't hear a damn thing. So
yeah,
we are sort of better off now with the nice clean PA and the big video screen.
Oh yeah. Occasionally I do a talk, from Headstocks to Woodstock with video and slides and stuff. And one of the first ones I did a question and answer at the end of it. And this girl said, "Oh, so do you mean?" And we talked about Woodstock. And in fact, oh God, he's not a physiotherapist. He's an osteopath.
Right.
I was going to an osteopath at the time. And this osteopath said, he said, I went to Woodstock. I was on a cycling holiday. He said, and we cycled and we were right at the back. He said, and it was bizarre because he said the sound sort of went, and so this girl then piped up and she said, "What do you mean there were no television screens, no video screens?" I said, "Yeah, they weren't even heard of in those days." I said, "There wasn't even any stage covering, I mean, health and safety was out the window in those days,
There was no health and safety. I mean, there were fire bombs and there was flames going, flames with confetti at the same time. It was bedlam, but you know what? It was great. Now, I didn't ask you about Woodstock because...
Hang on.
Yeah?
One thing. Out of all the places I mentioned at the beginning, the Albert Hall was a great atmosphere to play in. It had terrible sound to start with, but later they put in some discs over the stage, which did improve it somewhat. But I always enjoyed playing there. It was all quite often difficult to hear each other. Bear in mind, didn't have any monitors in those days either.
No in-ears.
No, I didn't use them.
Yeah, and wedges that would always blow out. I don't know how any of you guys survived, quite frankly.
We didn't even have those.
You didn't have wedges?
I think Alvin had wedges for the vocal, and that was it. There weren't any for anybody else. I certainly never had any. I didn't have any till 1988.
Wow, that's actually kind of surprising. But you know what? Your hearing probably thanks you. It must be great playing with the in-ears because you can block out all that stuff.
I can't use it here. I can't get on with it. I've tried it. I can't do it at all.
Really?
But what I did in the old days was we had the Marshall stacks. So Alvin had 4 Marshall cabinets on my left. Chick had another 4 to the left of that. And Leo had 4 cabinets on the right. Now, Alvin only used a 50-watt amp. Leo used the full 200 or whatever. And I don't know what Chick had. But I used to set the kit up. And bear in mind, there are no risers, no drum risers. So I set the kit up on the floor of the stage. And I set it up so that I was directly between Leo's speakers and Alvin's, not in front, because sound travels in a straight line and it went straight out the front. And I think, touch wood, that's what saved my hearing. Obviously has gone off a bit with my age, but I think that's what saved from deafness, because had I sat further forward, I would have been deaf as a post. And that way, and also what was great, we all enjoyed playing together better in that scenario than when we got the drum risers and the rest of it, because then you had to have something. But I mean, Madison Square Garden, I definitely didn't have any monitors.
Well, thank God, because your hearing would have been gone. And just in terms of showmanship, and I'll end on this. Back then you had Bowie coming out, you had Alice Cooper, you had Kiss, you had all kinds of bands, even Queen with Freddie Mercury doing very, very expressive. How important was that for 10 years after, in terms of having a show and not just being a concert, but really being a show? Did you worry about that at all, or you just say, screw it, we're just going to play our songs?
We're still the same. We just go out and play.
Yeah?
Yeah, we don't have a show as such, no.
Was there any pressure, though, to get you into...
Sorry.
Was there any pressure to get you into sequins and tights and makeup and confetti cannons and?
At one point, I went through a period of when I heard that Keith Richards wore eye makeup. I decided I'd do some eyeliner and stuff, and I also bought a pair of glitter boots with high heels in the style of Elton John, and I bought them in Lincoln, Nebraska. Would you believe? Middle of nowhere.
Great place for anyway. Sting in the Tail, folks. Deluxe edition coming in March. Rick, an absolute pleasure.
Don't forget my book.
Don't forget the book. Yes, plug it again, please.
You can get it by, if you look at 10-years-after.co.uk. There's a form on there you can fill in to order it, and then that way they can get a signed copy.
Ooh, I might have to go buy one of those.
It's a lot of the stories that you and I have been discussing tonight.
Yes, except better explained and at length, and everybody's going to have to get that. So get the book, get the deluxe edition, and get a ticket to a show when the band gets back on the road. And hopefully, Montreal will be on that list.
Oh, well, I'll make sure it is.
Merci bien. Thank you so much.
Pas de problème. Merci beaucoup.
Cheers.
À bientôt.
À bientôt. See, we got that. All right.